All right, so we've already talked a bit about what utilitarians would say about punishment. We punish criminals because it deters them, right? You know, mainly, partially deterrence for the person punished because if he's in jail, he can't commit more crimes. But more than that, deterrence for other criminals, right? We make an example of this person, other criminals see it. More generally, criminals know there's a punishment in place, and so people who might otherwise want to commit crime decide they're not going to do it. Now, what would Kant think of this? Would he like it? Do we maybe, all right, well, maybe we don't need to talk about Kant. You know, Kant's not against utilitarians, or at least Kantians aren't. As Nagel says, Kantians, people who think in this way, can factor consequences in. Maybe we just have punishment because it has good consequences, which would be fine as long as it doesn't use anyone as a mere means, right? Well, if we say to the person we punish, imagine we say as a society, he asks, why are you punishing me? Why are you locking me up? And we're like, well, you see, we need to have this in place to deter people. So we have to carry out the punishment because, if we don't, if people know that we don't do it, no deterrence. What's more, people will know about people like you. You'll be a good example. It'll scare other people so they won't commit crime. So, sorry, that's why we're doing it. Think for a second, you know, what do you think Kant would say, and Kantians, about that whole rationale? Does that respect people as ends in themselves, or is there a whiff of using someone as a mere means about this? Well, I'm not going to just sit here with a lot of dead air, right? I think the answer is Kantians will not like this. If you're punishing people for these reasons, if this is your justification, this looks very much like using people as a mere means. Not just the criminal, I mean, he's the one who has the most ground to complain, but even the public, right? You are trying to scare us. You know, the philosopher Hegel, a successor of Kant, who criticized Kant on a number of things, but at least on this issue of punishment, at least in some respects, Hegel will agree with Kant. And Hegel says, this whole utilitarian approach treats human beings like dogs. You threaten them with a stick so they don't bite. He thinks it is fundamentally insulting to human dignity if this is how we justify punishing criminals. And he does so on pretty Kantian grounds. Kant doesn't have any lines this memorable, which is why I pull it from Hegel. But I think Kant would agree. This utilitarian approach to punishment treats criminals as a mere means. It does not respect human beings, so it's out. Well, what would Kant say then? Would Kant just say, well, we can't punish criminals? It might seem like that, right? Most criminals, you say, well, okay, now you see you've done something bad, so you see that we have to lock you up. Most criminals are going to say, no, no, yeah, I don't like that. You know what? I choose not to. I don't want to go to jail. You say, well, you have to. It's like, well, no, you have to respect my ability as a rational being to make choices. I choose not to go to jail. You don't like that choice. You don't agree. Maybe I deserve to go to jail, but I don't want to. You can't use me as a mere means, so bye. It might seem like Kant would say that. That seems problematic, right? Most of us, some people are prison abolitionists, but I honestly think even most prison abolitionists, when you push them, they don't really believe that we shouldn't punish criminals, right? What they believe is, well, we punish the people we punish way too heavily. Race and class and things like that have a role in the criminal justice system. But very few people really think we should just let murderers walk free, right? You know, Is Kant then a full-on abolitionist, or does he have to be? I think that would be hugely problematic. And just to tip my cards to you guys, he's not. Kant very much thinks we should punish criminals, but he is going to have a different justification for it, a different theory of what its aim and justification is than will the utilitarian. But the problem seems deeper, right? It's not just, well, how do you punish criminals? And this is one I want to keep coming back to, especially when we get to the unit on distributive justice, is that the problem seems deeper. The government does a lot of stuff, right? Punishing criminals is one thing, and it's always going to be in the background because for all the stuff the state does, it's going to have to order us to do stuff, and if we don't do it, it's going to have to punish us in some way, be that send us to jail or take our property or something else. But how can you, under threat of force, make people do stuff? Even good stuff, right? Most of us probably think there should be public schools, but somebody has to pay for it, right? We all have to pay for it. How can you force me under threat of prison to support educating children, right? Maybe I just want to educate my own kids and leave everybody else's kids, fend for themselves. That's not how I feel, but if I did, how could you force me to pay for education, right? I agree education is a good thing, but there are a lot of things that I think are a good thing that I don't think people should be allowed to force me to do that would be using me as a mere means, right? I think it's a good thing that, the roads and the streets are clear. My wife used to work for the city of Chesapeake, and they would always have, clean the bay day. I always got volunteered for this. Right? I do think it's a good thing, right? I would very much resent it and think it was terrible if I had to go out and do clean the bay day under threat of going to jail, right? That would be using me as a mere means to a good end, but using me as a mere means, right? How can Kant and Kantians justify having a government at all that makes us do things under threat of bad stuff happening, under threat of coercion? How is that justifiable? That is a question I want to keep coming back to. If you really think there shouldn't be a government, you're an anarchist. How can you be a Kantian and not an anarchist? And this might be one of those things some people are going to bite the bullet on. There are a few Kantian anarchists out there. Yes, Kant, anarchism. For me, I just don't think anarchism is a realistic or acceptable doctrine. So if Kant committed us to anarchism, I think that would be a very serious problem for his theory. And remember we said, Kant said that we can use force when our life is under imminent threat or the life of other innocent people are. So maybe you could justify police officers detaining people if they're literally holding a gun to somebody's head or even shooting them. Government maybe you could justify having a military that defends us from other countries that want to do us harm. But the government uses force for a lot more than that, right? And even there, it's like, how would you force me to support the police or the army, right? If we punish a murderer, it's not because he's getting ready to murder somebody, right? We might not think that he's going to murder anybody in the future. And even if we do, that's not the main reason we punish. How in the world is that justifiable? Yes, we punish in a sense to protect ourselves, but the threat is not imminent in most cases in the way it is to street speak strictly of self-defense, how is a Kantian going to square that with treating people as ends in themselves, with respect for freedom? Now, I think a Kantian will, but I just want you guys to appreciate the force of this problem. I think it's really, it's an interesting problem. We tend to just accept, hey, there should be a government. It should be allowed to do all this stuff. But I think it's an interesting question to open up. Well, okay, should there? And if so, why exactly, right? And it is a problem Kant and Kantians need to address. And I think we'll understand a lot more about what Kantianism really is and how it works once we address this. So we will start doing that in the next lecture.